We all want to bring the Zoom back into our golden oldies. Mr. Binks is 14, and he was born with a joint condition that we've managed over the years with his raw food diet, choice supplements, and physical therapies. But I'm thrilled to have added Zoomies, long chain hyaluronic acid with added vitamin C, simply into Mr. Binks's meals. Its role is being like a shock absorber in the synovial fluid. That's the natural joint oil found in hips, knees, and shoulders. It lets them glide rather than grind together and potentially causing pain. But the sad fact is, the body's HA production annoyingly depletes with age. And when his joints are sore, they break the HA down more quickly. Zumi has been created by vets, supporting all life stages and cats too. So find out more on my website, annaweb.co.uk, in the recommends page, and redeem your discount. I'm Anna Webb, and welcome to my podcast, A Dog's Life. And this week, we're talking to behaviour expert Andrew Hale. And this episode is sponsored by Zoomies. Andrew Hale, welcome back to A Dog's Life.
Oh, hi, Anna. Good to be here again.
Oh, no, I am pleased. Now, Andrew, you're a certified behaviour expert in dogs, and, you have a human psychology degree, which I think sometimes is very useful when you're actually training dogs.
Well, yeah, I think so. And because, as we've kind of discussed before, I think when we think about behavior more widely and training, that there's a lot that connects us with dogs, actually, and our own experiences of learning and our own focus on certain things and what's important. And I think there's a lot of emphasis on both children and dogs to behave rather than actually understanding what those intrinsic needs might be. So I think there's a lot of crossover actually from the human side of things to dogs. And as you and I both know, the dogs are one thing, but it's the general public who have to care for them. And I think that's part of the conversation today, isn't it?
Well, yes, no, absolutely. I mean, we all have to have some boundaries in life, some etiquette, like with children, in the playground, sharing the swings, not falling off the swings, behaving on the swings so they're not going to hurt themselves and fall off and things like that. And discipline to kind of finish off their homework and these kinds of things. And similar things like this are true with dogs, aren't they, Andrew?
Yeah, I agree. I think boundaries are important. The big thing is for me that they shouldn't be boundaries. They shouldn't be barriers to unmet need. I think that's an important thing for children and dogs. I think it depends on what end of the telescope we want to look at with things. I think the general public especially have been let down a little bit when it comes to dogs in regards to the big emphasis on just training before, because they might learn how to teach sit, for example, and expect it even when the dog might struggle to give it. But we're not empowering the general public with actually understanding who dogs are and what they need. I think that's an extra element we have to recognize as trainers, that we have to make sure that they are equipped to know about what pain looks like, about what stress looks like, about development stages for their pup. I think it's something like 45% of dogs that ended up in the RSPCA centres a couple of years ago were adolescent males.
No, it's interesting. Now, I've heard the same thing, actually. Well, 18 months tends to be when you look at dogs on all these, whether it's the RSPCA or, All Dogs Matter or, whoever, they all tend to be 18 months because it's that point as well, I think, where owners with all the best intentions have gotten through the tricky puppy stage, and then suddenly their dogs become a teenager and going through the hormonal changes, rebelling and disagreeing with them in the park, and then they think, I can't do this anymore. It's interesting.
That's a really good point. I think you're right. I think and this shows a little bit about what we're saying here about how how aware and how empowered or even equipped caregivers are, guardians, to understand that. Because if we have a mindset of a task orientated way of viewing dogs, so which is quite transactional, which is what training is, and somebody has been kind of led to believe that, the most important thing is to get my training done, and the most important thing is to get a kind of an obedient dog. There's going to be times when the dog isn't able to fulfill that request, and then that brings the person to think that their dog is now disobedient. Where in fact quite often it's about that dog's development stages. There's a part of our brain which helps us to regulate better and help us to kind of deal with the emotional stuff. And in humans, it starts in our adolescence, and it finishes kind of wiring up in our late 20s. In dogs, Anna, it doesn't even start till 18 months. So actually, we're asking so much of these dogs. So it's no wonder the general public, who have been sold this idea often about, well, hang on, I go to puppy classes, dog training classes, and now my dog should do as they're told. But it's very
Mm,
hard. If you imagine the dog's brain has lots of little doors in it, same applies to us, by the way. And we need as many doors to stay open for the dog to be able to learn and hear what we're saying, and be able to kind of integrate information and be able to do, those kind of tasks. The problem is pain, trauma, and stress of any kind, actually, including kind of frustration, excitement. They're all big door closers.
mm.
And the thing is, for us, same things for us. So, um, if we end up getting in a kind of an elevated or pressured state, the first doors that start closing for us are the doors where those more kind of rational cognitive doors, the doors that stay open, are our survival doors. And that's why we can all say and do things in the moment when we haven't got enough doors open, that we might apologize or regret later when we've got a few more doors open. And it's the same for the dog. But the thing is, with the young dogs, especially, some of those doors, remember, aren't even open until 18 months, because that's when that more regulated framework in the brain kicks off. But also, the doors that are likely to start closing for the dog are the doors that we've put training behind often, because a lot of the training that we do has no intrinsic value to them. The
Mm.
doors that are likely to stay open are their survival doors. So when the dog might be able to sit, or kind of take those cues and respond to them, in some situations when they don't, if the general public don't understand that, they just think their dog's being naughty or difficult or disobedient. And then if
Yes.
they start pushing against that, and that nervous system then starts to feel unsafe, it's no wonder during adolescence it's quite a tough time for the caregiver and the dog.
Yes, no, absolutely, absolutely. It's difficult, if you, I guess, return home and find your sofa totally chewed up or something. There's these
Yeah.
pictures that you see on social media, of a dog in a disintegrated sofa, and very, very worrying. And that's often a cause, or, symptom of separation anxiety, which is kind of a big buzzword really now. I mean, there was always separation anxiety, massively augmented, obviously through the pandemic, because our living arrangements were unnatural. So how are you proposing to, because there's, lots of people do dog training, and in many ways dog training is a great thing to do. Enroll your puppy, meeting other people, like-minded people, there's socialization going on. It's important to give your dog experiences, and so this is all good, contrary to when we were in the pandemic, training your dog alone in your apartment, not necessarily great for onward social skills. How do these classes need to be different then? Does there need to be more just sitting, having conversations with, the expert involved, explaining why your puppy might be choosing your skirting boards to chew on, rather than the chew that you just bought them from the pet shop?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think a lot of progressive dog training classes are involving more. A lot of them now, for example, the first session, you don't go with your dog or your puppy, you go and learn some basics as their caregiver without the disruption of it, because I think it's important. As you say, training is cool. I have a little mantra which is learn, support, teach, which is just thinking about learning from the dog first, which is the shift, I think, because that dog has their own kind of safety cues, their own ways of processing the world, their own kind of ways of the world. And it's always good to learn that first, even from a puppy. I've given videos of 16, 17-week-old pups that can teach us a lot. I'm a consultant for a large assistance dog charity here, and It's amazing what those young dogs can tell us about how they need to navigate the world safely. So if we learn that first, support that first, and then teach things that are likely to be intrinsically valuable for the dog, like the life skill stuff. And then after that, you can train what you like, Anna, and make it fun.
When you say the
Um,
intrinsically life skills, so
yeah,
what are we talking there? In plain English, is it calling your dog lots of times from one room to another, and then transferring that? Hopefully, you have a garden into your garden, so that and then building the distractions gradually.
that can be. I think the thing about intrinsic stuff is what we have to understand is that young dog, that young child, has their own internal safety needs. When we think about the function of behavior, behavior is often a communication of need, um, the need to feel heard, for example, especially if we're trying to communicate emotional need, the need to feel safe, big time, physical safety, but also emotional and social safety. There's a lot of what we've learned about ourselves about social safety, and you were talking about earlier about separation that we actually learn from observations and studies on animals, including dogs. So it's no different, really. We all want to feel safe. And the big one for me, Anna, is the need to find relief. The whole point of having the negative emotions and feelings is to kind of have a call to arm to find relief. A lot of the big dog behavior challenges are often a dog seeking relief. They're trying to find relief for the pain or relief for the stress or relief for whatever. So actually intrinsic safety stuff, if we're looking at that young dog. So for example, um, there are three really important words that we look at in the progressive side of child support, and especially for children who might be struggling or might even be non-verbal. And those words are processing, engagements, and exits. And these three words we know formulate the foundation to feel safe, because if the dog feels safe, they can learn, Anna. It's the same for us, isn't it? We can't feel
Mm.
safe. Many people go through school and don't feel safe, sadly, and their behavior is affected by that at school. But then sadly, they're labeled as difficult or disruptive as children, and they're treated as such. So it just
No, no,
becomes
no,
a
and
cycle.
labeling. Yeah, and
Yeah,
labeling is
labeling.
different.
Yeah,
I mean, with rescues, particularly, what you say, because obviously you first bring a rescue in or rehome, like my little Mr. Binks. He hadn't had a good start in life. He was already
yeah,
2 when he came in, and he was absolutely terrified. And I knew there was only one way, which was to leave him alone. Don't pressure him. Let him come towards me if he wants to. If he doesn't, that's absolutely fine. He might do tomorrow. And then bit by bit, he was curious, and it was like, oh, I want to be where it's all happening. I know there's a bag of treats over there. I want to have a treat, but I just can't muster the courage, And then bit
yeah,
by bit, he did. And the rest is history. From a very shy, total, oh, wreck is a good way of putting it. He's, starred on Sky TV, pranced around in front of Kay Burley, won her over with his remarkable ears, and all sorts of other great things. So, and that's so rewarding. But of course, when you've got a puppy, it's kind of, I think people perhaps feel, look, you're my puppy. I've bought you. I want you to fit seamlessly into my life. And they have an idea, an image of how this journey with their dog is going to be. Often, so we're going to segue now nicely, hopefully, to social media. I feel in recent years, social media has often presented this perfect life with your dog, beautiful walks where nothing bad happens ever. My dog never rolls in fox poo and all this wonderful
yeah,
thing. And then quite the opposite can occur. And someone's like, oh, no one told me they eat fox poo. Things like that. You know what I'm saying. Why doesn't he listen to me in the park? He keeps eating sticks. All of these behaviors that will ring true to and it's difficult. Whereas if you are at the stage where you want to adopt a dog, it's perhaps more easy to comprehend that, well, the dog's had a trauma, is found on a pavement, no fixed abode, don't know how long he's been walking along, he's pretty in a bad state, then there's perhaps a little bit more empathy.
You know, I've met Mr. Binks, of course, and I think you've told that story just, Anna, in a very
Yes.
kind of matter of fact way, but actually it's because it is matter of fact to you, but it's a deeply profound one. And I think this is the point. You learned something deeply about his survival story, and you kind of helped him to find a return to safety through those wonderful compassionate values that you have. And actually, it's a powerful story when you think about it, because the thing is, a lot of the general public wouldn't necessarily be that way. Because if they've been persuaded, especially by some of these trainers on social media who are not particularly clued up to the behavior of dogs, they're just interested in how to make them behave. A lot of caregivers, sadly, that relationship starts the other way, Anna. You know, the dog
Mm.
grumbles or growls to say, I need a bit of space, but they think, oh, hang on, my dog's being dominant, so I must treat them that
Oh,
way. So
yeah.
this is where, so actually it's a very profound story about Mr. Biggs. When I was talking about processing engagements and exits, this is very important because we all need to process the world. We all have to make sense of it. And there are some things, especially when we think about sensory processing sensitivities, you know, whether some of those sensory dials are already dialed up, you know, we can easily get overwhelmed by the world. There are dogs like that too, as we know. So it's about learning those processing needs. And Mr. Binks needed time to process his new environment. He needed time to process you. And
Mm.
that's where the engagement thing comes in, because we all want to feel that we have choice over how we engage with the world, physically, sexually, emotionally, you know, whatever it might be. And we need to give dogs, this is that kind of learning from the dog things again, and giving them things that are intrinsically valuable to get, so they can learn, I can have time to process this. I can have some choice about when I'm ready to engage or not. And that's the final one, which is exits. You know, if we do engage, we want to feel we have an exit. Mr. Binks, you didn't put pressure on him to engage. He engaged when he was ready, and that built trust with you. The
Mm.
wonderful late Sarah Fisher, my dear friend, is not with us anymore.
I
One of
know,
her
so
sayings
sad.
was, it is really sad, and I miss her deeply. She said, you know, take it slow and the trust will grow. And it's
Mm.
always the case to do less, not more. The trouble with the general public, I think they're told to do more, you know, do more this, do more of that. And the exits are important because Mr. Binks knew that he could exit.
Yes, yes.
Um,
It
so
was
it's
so fun.
important. These things are important, and
Yes.
they are so fundamental. And it's the same for that puppy that comes in. That little puppy can still teach us a huge amount about how they want to process the world, how they need to engage. And trauma is very centered around a lack of agency and choice over engagement and exit. You know, we find ourselves in a situation we feel uncomfortable with and we can't exit from it. That is in itself traumatic. Whether or not that becomes traumatizing depends on the thing. But so it's no wonder then if we step back a little bit and think, right, this is integral to any kind of social mammal, especially we have a lot of connections with dogs, feeling safe, building secure attachments, all these kind of things. You know, John Bowlby, who's the kind of grandfather of attachment theory, he didn't get his inspiration from children. He got his inspiration from Conrad Lawrence in his work with birds, and Harry Harlow in his work with monkeys,
Mm.
because it's ingrained in us. So when that young puppy then, who isn't given much chance to process stuff because they're marched through everything, everything's quite overwhelming. They engagement comes to them when they don't want it because dogs just run up to them or people just want to touch them, and they can't exit because they're on a lead or they're stuck in a room. It's no wonder when they get to 9, 10, 11 months, we start to see, in inverted commas, those reactive behaviors because the nervous system is not learning to feel safe. And we see
Mm.
the same with children, sadly, you know, through a lot of the educational system. You know, we have a big structured learning bias as a species. Children must go through school,
Mm.
dogs must go through dog training. But our own nervous system is more interested in experiential learning.
Mm.
And there's a
It's
very
interesting.
powerful little term from psychology which underpins this, which is there is a difference between what we are taught and what we learn.
Yes, that
And
is so interesting, actually. It's funny also, I love what you're saying, Andrew, by the way. And I remember, because I picked up Prudence and I remember her breed. I've spent lots of time with her and, visited her loads and all the rest of it, sent her voice recordings. I mean, the works. Anyway, and then I remember you saying, Anna, the one thing I find totally useless for bull terriers, I go, what's that? Oh, she went, puppy training classes, and I just burst out laughing. And I just like, they're absolutely right, in a way, because they're quite idiosyncratic bull terriers. So unless you've trained, bull terriers, they don't really respond like other dogs. Absolutely quite right. And let her develop more, and absolutely right. So I do I do hear what you're saying, but how can we get this message across more
Yeah.
to encourage sentience? I mean, is it sentience here or emotional intuition to get this across?
This is the big challenge. We're kind of going bigger kind of zooming out here a little bit, I guess. But um, if we are to zoom out a little bit, actually, it's got nothing to do with dogs, Anna, ultimately, because it's got something to do with society more generally, I think. We're all indoctrinated in what we call the good bad continuum, this notion that somehow behavior is good or bad, and we reward good and we punish bad. And that is so ingrained in us, we don't really question it until we start asking questions about who's deciding actually what's good or bad, and how much did that behavior actually represent to the other. When we think about that structured learning bias we have, and the push for attainment, Anna, over achievement. We
Mm,
see this in dogs, we see it in humans. For little Johnny today, he's in school today. Well, that's an achievement for him because he didn't sleep last night. He didn't have breakfast this morning. He's got trauma at home, but he made it to school. That's an achievement. But because he can't learn in that state and he can't attain what the teacher wants from him, he's somehow seen as being difficult, disruptive, or whatever else. And a lot of the dogs I work with, I specialize in working with aggressive dogs. And why are they aggressive? Because they don't feel safe and they don't feel heard and they aren't finding relief for something. That's the problem for them. And if one of those dogs was to make it into that village hall to do a dog training class, that's an achievement for that dog to actually be in there and not lose their mind. But
mm.
because they can't go on and attain what's on that clipboard, they're now not a good citizen in inverted commas. So actually, this is a broader point for all of us, I think, Anna, that we have to understand. And that's why it is challenging. This is that shift from task to care.
Yeah.
Most people are stuck in the task orientated mindset because that's how we live our lives a lot of the time. We put ourselves under a lot of pressure to formulate task.
Yeah, no, I get that, but giving pet parents a bit of, slack, if you like, I would agree, that it is important to train some cues, tasks, if you like, so that there can be management, a simple, practical way in the home, to
Yeah,
stop your dog injuring itself, like
that is
like
really important.
yeah, exactly. But in terms of, so certain in your bed queue, dog may not want to go into their dog bed at that particular moment, but because the human might have a Zoom call to do or something, then for practicality's sake, it's best that the dog's in a place where he's comfortable, he's safe, not going to fall down the stairs mid Zoom meeting or something, those sorts of things. I mean, how do you sit on that sort of a conversation?
Oh, I 100% agree. This is the shift from task to care, though, because a task orientated approach, the problem with it is it if you have a task orientated approach, it doesn't mean you don't care, but task becomes supreme. And actually, if we think about aversive training, it is just a kind of a manifestation of task at all costs, regardless of how you feel, you will do it. That's the problem there, though, is if we have a level of understanding about, like you say, sentiency, what happens if the dog doesn't do it? How much understanding is there about the mechanisms of why they might not be able to do it? And I think the training is cool. It's the same as any kind of teaching. If we are feeling well regulated, if we feel safe, now we can learn and we can learn things. And a more care orientated approach isn't about not doing tasks. As I say, I work with an assistance dog charity, and those dogs have a very important task to do. But we know it's a fact. It's scientifically factual that that dog is more likely to do the task if they are physically and emotionally well regulated.
Yeah.
And this is very important because otherwise training fails. And then we
Mm,
have to ask the question why, and we shouldn't be blaming the dog. I think for
mm,
the general public, if the only information, I think this is where this is why this conversation is so great, and where you and I are kind of coming from the same place here, which is training is important, but for a lot of the general public, if that's the only thing they've been influenced by, and they can't get the dog to do it,
mm.
then that's when their frustrations build. That's where the dog gets frustrated. That's where the relationship breaks down, and that's where the dog gets gets relinquished. And also, I think we have to. So I think this is about trying to give the general public more of an understanding upon the nature of these things, rather than the major. There's a lot of people out there who think they know about behavior, but in fact, they're just very good at making another behave.
Mm.
We have the same in the school system. I had deep trauma as a child, and it affected my behavior. And my school decided to treat me quite punitively, and I ended up getting the cane. And guess what? My behavior did change because I didn't want the cane again. But actually, on a more personal level, that's what led to my breakdown some 15 or odd years later, because my trauma and how I felt about it hadn't changed. I just changed my behavior. But
Yeah, it
internally,
is.
I still hadn't found any difference. So I think we just got to try and find ways to inject more understanding for the general public about that. But there is another point here as well, Anna, which is we're not very good at recognizing kind of things in other humans, are we? Let alone dogs.
No, well, I think as well, we're living in a very strange time. I've joined the Raw Evolution at Naturaw because I know that not all raw food is created equal. I'm passionate about feeding dogs as nature intended. After all, you are what you eat, and so is your dog. At Naturaw, there are no compromises, no confusion, just real raw food made with integrity and a conscience, offering 100% transparency, supporting British farmers, and only using the highest welfare assured ingredients is so important. They're a certified B Corp and reduce their carbon footprint by utilizing solar power and planting trees. They only use completely plastic-free packaging that's home compostable. Prudence and Mr. Binks are simply loving their nutrient-dense and balanced recipes. So try NatuRaw today. Just go to naturaw.co.uk and grab 20% off your first purchase with my code AnnaWeb20. Join the Raw Evolution and feed exceptional raw food. And just quickly, a quick nod to Pet Remedy, because I noticed on Pet Remedy's website, because I'm a great fan of Pet Remedy. I've got one of the diffusers on the go at the moment. It's absolutely brilliant because it's all natural and it's just a lovely combination of calming herbs. So I feel very good about that wafting around. But there's something on there, sorry, being a bit vague, advising where people can go, to help a bit more with their dog.
Yeah, well, that's great. So this is the whole point, really, of our whole conversation today. We thought about, right. So the general public struggle to know necessarily about who to turn to. So we've created this Ask the Professionals. So we've teamed up with companion animal wellbeing, who have a team of really highly qualified and suitably accredited professionals. They're clinical behaviorists for dogs and cats, actually.
Good, good, good.
Anna. So the general public, and it's a really good rate. So the thing is, for about 25, 26 pounds, you can access somebody and have an initial triage. And then I think it's not that much more really to have proper consult. So at least if you're somebody who wants to do their diligence there and think, do you know what, I am struggling a little bit, or I've struggled with advice before, or I do want to kind of access something for my companion animal, then ask the professional. You can access it on the website, and that will take you through to the service. So that's what the service is there for, really.
No, it's a really good idea. No, brilliant. Just also, it's always good to get a second opinion. I mean, I don't want to segue into vets and a conversation about vets today at all. Don't panic. Laugh. That's a joke. But, same with vets, always get a
Oh,
second
you must do.
opinion.
Oh, you
Absolutely.
must.
Same with your builder, you get a second opinion for your builder. Do you know what I mean? Kind of normally, wouldn't you? It's like, really? It's going to be that much? But, yeah,
We have
yeah.
to empower people to advocate more for both their dogs and themselves. I had terrible health a few years ago, and I was being dismissed by a consultant, and I had to advocate myself and get that second opinion. And it's not against the individuals; it's just if we feel something's wrong, we have to advocate and we have to feel empowered for that.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer in trying to remove power imbalances within these relationships, because
No.
sadly people take advice and then they don't question it, even though they know their gut is telling them actually that isn't right.
I know. It is so complicated. No, but I know. I think the organisation I've studied with actually is in your in the pet remedy thing. Am I right? The CIVT, College of Integrated Veterinary Therapies. I thought I saw it on there, but I might not have done. But I noticed the service thing, so I think it's very good. So go to petremedy.co.uk.com.
That's it. Yeah, petremedy.co.uk, and you'll see there's a quite a prominent little box there about ask the professional. You can just click on that, and yeah.
Great. Well, listen, thank you again, Andrew. And I think, yes, let's try and change the world.
Well,
Slowly,
I like
bit.
this saying that, let's grow one dog at a time.
Yes.
That's nice.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Well, thank you, Andrew. And all the links to you will be, and Pet Remedy will be in the show notes. Andrew, thank you again.
Thank you, Anna.
That's our show. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, go on, rate and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks again to Andrew Hale for joining us today, and all the links to Andrew and to Pet Remedy are in the show notes. Thanks, of course, to Mike for all the music and production as ever. And if you want to find out more about Zoomy, go to my recommends page, which is at annaweb.co.uk. And if you haven't already, go on, subscribe, because it's free. It's not like other subscriptions. It's free to subscribe to A Dog's Life. And that way you'll never miss another show. Bye for now.